as more and more national legislation no longer gets done in DC, you have to focus on grassroots legislation and legislation that pops up in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, and run these mini campaigns. So it's the same skill set. The variables, I tell this all the time to friends of mine, the variables for cooking, is like heat, ingredients, quality of ingredients. For campaigns, it's time, people, and money. And so you're just so used to that memory muscle that once you know how to do political campaigns, to switch that into public affairs, public opinion campaigns, city council ordinances, and all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my God, the entire world is sort of hyper focused on this equation of time, people, and money, and pushing urgency.
Welcome to the pod.
Awesome. Glad to be here and excited to continue the conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks, man. So we got a little bit different today. Let me tell the millions of our followers. So it's usually when we do over Pint, I'm also joined with Kurt Lingle and Brian Meehan. This is spring break, and plus there's just other things that come up, and it's one of those perfect storms where, Scott, you're stuck with me, but I think you got the best out of the three, and don't let them hear that, okay?
All right, I'm sure they won't listen.
All right. Scott, I'm going to let you do the intro about yourself, but you sent over a bunch of links, a bunch of just stuff about you and your background, just a briefing, right? Just, dude, you're just like an amazing guy. You've done a lot of like really cool stuff. I mean, and Scott, I'm telling you, I read it when you first sent it over, which was a couple of weeks ago. And then last night I spent some time going through it again. I'm like, damn, this is good stuff. So, Scott, tell everybody, give us a little bit of, the background about you, what you do, then we'll jump in from there.
Sure. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I do have Wisconsin roots. My grandparents were Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So, awesome. So keeping it with the podcast theme. I went off to school, an angry kid in Cleveland, pissed off about NAFTA and wanting to revolutionize the world. There weren't a lot of revolutions going on in the mid 90s, but I got involved in a lot of the activism world that was happening. So some labor rights, workers' rights, justice for janitors type campaigns, and then anti-war in Iraq. And then half my career was in politics, but I needed to afford to go to college. And so I was working in bars, nightclubs, and the DC punk rock scene. And so it was normal in DC, progressive left, political punk rock, to drop out and go tour with your band, or to drop out and go work on a political campaign. So I made mom and dad very happy by dropping out. No, I kid. I eventually went back and got a master's. But I dropped out and joined political campaigns. Ron Wyden's U.S. Senate race in 94, 95. Then when you win, like any of ad agencies, once you get that big win, you go on the road. So I managed campaigns for about 10 years, bouncing around the country, living out of my car. All size campaigns, congressionals, U.S. Senate races, governor's races, ballot initiatives, and eventually got involved in independent expenditure work, ran something called Rock Against Bush and Punk Voter. In 2004, it was one of the first independent expenditure campaigns, which is beautiful. You are your own client, essentially. And that got me into, producing campaigns, which is a little bit different beast. And eventually went in and did online organizing for Barack Obama's campaign, all of his social media, lifestyle marketing, mobile technology. I met one of your guests on there. We worked together on that, Doug Busk, when text messaging was brand new and hadn't been used for campaigns, and when social media was still all being used for good, on campaigns. So that was first generation. Eventually went opened up my own agency. Did about 10 years in the agency world, scaling mobile applications, digital campaigns, websites, online advertising for a lot of progressive left clients called Revolution Messaging. Moved on, sold that firm about 3 years ago, and now scale international campaigns, a lot of international NGOs. I do 4 or 5 campaigns at a time. And then I produced last year, Remember What They Did, which is going back to my roots of independent expenditure campaign. It was active in Wisconsin in Get Out the Vote effort on behalf of Joe Biden.
Cool. Hey, Scott, so just from my own background, just being kind of a little bit of a political junkie, and talk to me when you say you were on the, running campaigns or, involved in the campaign. What is that like? Just give us a sense of what that world is, like I'm guessing there's not a typical day, but how would you break stuff down on your activities throughout a campaign? Because to me, it seems like it's a marathon that's also a sprint.
Yeah. And I think that this is where a lot of your agencies and marketing experts will gain from that sort of campaign mentality. So when I was managing campaigns, it's 2 or 3 people against the world with no budget. People think that these congressional races are, massive efforts, or you watch The West Wing and you see like, oh, you're all slinging zany jokes back and forth at each other. The reality is that it's a little bit more punk rock than that. You're living out of a group house with 3 or 4 campaign workers. You go in and try and win the campaign each day, and the majority of it is raising resources when no one's paying attention a year and a half out, so that when it used to be traditionally after Memorial Day of an election year, people start paying attention.
Right.
And, there was no real campaign work, official yard signs going up or TV ads going up before that. Now the campaign cycle has moved into an industry. So if you're working on a massive nationwide campaign, presidential style campaign, it's clearly not 3 people against the world. You had firms like Hawkfish and others for this last cycle, be hired before the campaign and have 50 people doing digital, where, on Obama's campaign in 2008, there were 4 of us on the digital team to launch the campaign. So it's turned into a very different beast, and folks are now graduating with college degrees and grad degrees in very specific niche advertising. And you've seen this all across the advertising industry with the rise of digital, that people that just focus their entire day on search advertising, people that focus their entire day on data and analytics. These were not fields, and still today on congressional races are not really something that most congressional races can afford. So, I enjoy the wild, wild west, the 3 people against the world type mentality, and working on messaging and knowing what messaging is going to resonate. And so you can do hundreds of thousands of dollars of polling, or you can hire best in class creatives. So the last campaign I did, like Remember What They Did campaign, I invested, I don't know, about $30,000 of my own money into it, and parlayed that into about an $800,000 Get Out the Vote effort. Basically wanting to hire up the creatives and the advertising side, instead of going to artists like Shepard Fairey, who did the Hope poster, 3 days before the election, say, hey, can you draw something beautiful? I've got this client that's got this great idea. Can you draw something amazing? But giving the artists time to do their craft really well. So we started that campaign in May, June, knowing that we wanted to launch in July, and that if we launched in July, then more funds and money would come in, and press and all the other things that you get when you have, international successful artists doing their work to the best of their ability.
So Scott, let's unpack that a little bit. There's a lot there. One of them, one point that stuck out that I want to go into a little bit more is this idea that when you were cutting your teeth in this space, it sounded like, again, ragtag group, three against the world. We're all in this together. We're dying on this hill, right? Now there's people coming out of college with majors in this area. On one hand, it sounds good. Okay, there's more maybe legitimacy around it. On the other hand, it's like, are you taking some of the edge out? Are you taking some of the, by now formalizing and having majors in this? Does marketing in general, maybe political marketing, does it lose something?
Well, when you message test over and over and over again, you've lost that moment and that urgency. And so I can pick on both Hillary Clinton's campaign at the same time at Mitt Romney's campaign. Mitt Romney had an article in the Washington Post that said it took him 22 approvals for every tweet. So once you get to that level of lawyers and people that are running your Twitter accounts, your urgency and your emotional appeal, or what we traffic in impulse buying, that's gone. So the good news is that Twitter made it really easy for everybody to jump on stuff. You do need to pump the brakes a little bit and make sure that those, three people against the world are not doing something ridiculous. So the good news with that is, the candidate's brother or the candidate's best friend or the candidate's law partner that managed their campaign that didn't know anything about creative or didn't know anything about marketing has sort of gone by the wayside and has evolved and matured. The bad side of it is 22 lawyers trying to evolve the creative. This has happened in corporate side too. I mean, Oreo campaign years ago was like the classic example of like, how do you lock your attorneys in the Super Bowl room with the creatives at the same time so that your tweets are going to get approval. And so, I worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2015, and we came up with rapid response approval processes that go, does this need to be run by the candidate? Does this not need to be run by the candidate? And thinking in a very fast way, I think you're watching both corporations and politicians try and know that the Mitt Romney style 22 approval process is wrong, but maybe not just having your brother or your law partner run anything roughshod at the same time. Our video was not to the same production level as Madison Avenue or Hollywood, but speed mattered in this new digital age. So if we could capture speed, emotion, a little bit of urgency, a little bit of that impulse buy, the second that Facebook did direct donation ads, all of a sudden it was no longer click to sign on to a petition, to get 15 emails to give a donation. It was click and give money right now. And that is a multi-million-dollar difference in impulse buying fundraising that the NGO world, doesn't matter if you're Save the Animal, Save the Dog, Save the Cats, any cause, interest, cancer, heart, leukemia, right? All of that fundraising changed dramatically with direct donations and impulse buying and Facebook advertising.
Scott, did you guys handle only political campaigns and events, or did you guys do also like corporate work, brands, that type of thing? Yeah, what was the breakdown on that?
Yeah, I mean, we were political at NGO, nonprofit, was probably 75 to 80% of our work.
Okay.
Political used to be that you do politics and then it would go away. And I apologize to all of your listeners because we've seen in our lifetime that it never goes away anymore. It used to be that guys that I knew in that old punk rock days of go manage a campaign would go skydiving, would go take 3 months off and do some maybe social justice work in South Africa or Europe, and then come back and as campaigns gear up. But what's happened is that you move very quickly from campaigning to grassroots campaigning. So as more and more national legislation no longer gets done in DC, you have to focus on grassroots legislation and legislation that pops up in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, and run these mini campaigns. So it's the same skill set. The variables, I tell this all the time to friends of mine, the variables for cooking, is like heat, ingredients, quality of ingredients. For campaigns, it's time, people, and money. And so you're just so used to that memory muscle that once you know how to do political campaigns, to switch that into public affairs, public opinion campaigns, city council ordinances, and all of a sudden you realize, like, oh my God, the entire world is sort of hyper focused on this equation of time, people, and money, and pushing urgency.
Scott, in your opinion, it seems to me that political advertising, political marketing has really come a long way, and maybe it's because there's a definitive cycle, right? There's a start and there's an end date. What is the difference, or what could brands and corporate advertising and corporate marketing kind of take away from the political world in terms of how they level up their game?
Well, I think it's a good continuation on this sort of time, people, money theme, that the timeline for my corporate clients that I work on now can always get pushed back. There's always this sort of fuzziness of, well, we'll do our experimentation budget in Q2. Now, you know what? We'll push that experimentation budget back to Q3. We didn't really have a good quarter, and some, legal person comes or CPA comes and tells you, okay, we're not going to do that type of experimentation. In political campaigns, if you don't get your experimentation done in the primary season, you have no time to experiment in the general. There are two ways of doing experiments. There's either live experiments or focus group and polling. I think that to answer your earlier question, younger generation doesn't trust their gut as much to really make the emotional, compelling argument. But if I'm running against somebody that didn't pay their taxes, maybe people care, maybe people don't care. If I'm running against somebody that has 3 felonies, I don't think I need to poll it. I know how to emotionally show a marketing message around this person wants to be an elected official but has 3 felony accounts, right? Like there is just sort of your gut. There's a school of thought that goes, you can poll and research everything, and then there's those of us who you've been in this long enough that you know the hits. And so with that timeline, really understanding that timeline to drill down into this is like, well, let me run all of my experiments. You can't take my experiments away in Q1 and Q2 and run a decent campaign.
Right.
And so I think that's one lesson for corporations. The other lesson for corporations is to sort of demand KPIs. More and more Silicon Valley folks are really focused on KPIs. The political world has always been, because if you're not raising the money, you're dead. There is no retail that you can go and pick it up from, or there's no additional say, like, you either raised enough of the resources or you didn't. Now, again, you may have a rich candidate or a wealthy donor that can give money.
Sure.
But the reality of that is that the pressure for immediate return and ROI is extreme. The downside of that, let's be honest, is it sometimes takes longer for advertising campaigns. I'm sure you have clients like this all the time, that it took you 6 or 7 months to sort of break through and build a larger brand. And so that type of campaign is the one thing that I think campaigns and NGOs can learn from corporate clients is those corporate clients that truly understood never messing with their branding budgets, especially like in times of COVID, where you're not seeing like Coca-Cola pull down every one of their signs on every football stadium in America because, well, it's COVID. We're not gonna sponsor all of that this year, right? Like there's still remnant advertising and reason to double down on your brand, so that you have some type of long-term brand and strength. And that's one thing that I think we've all learned during this time of COVID.
So you do the political thing. You open up your own agency, which is really, really digital focused, right? I want to get more into the text campaign with Obama, but you've got the picture that you're painting, Scott, is really, really embracing the digital world. But
yeah, I mean, the reason that we did the agency was it grew out of necessity. So there was an example of this. Everybody would call Congress. You'd see every ad in America that was like, call Congress and urge them to pass X. And media consultants would put 202-225-1212, the congressional switchboard number on there. And there would be some old lady at the congressional switchboard that would transfer your call to your member of Congress. She'd ask you your zip code and she'd transfer your call. But you got the client that ran the ad never got how many calls went through. Half the callers would see a TV ad and never call. Those that did call would get pissed off that the line was busy, et cetera, right? So we built this little calling tool with Twilio. We were one of the first ones to just build this little call Congress. And then you realize, oh, this is really complicated. As bills turn into laws, they turn into shuffles. You want to call people in district. You want to call people, the members of Congress can turn their phones off. Eventually we had this thing down to every state legislature, and it rolls to their home cell phone or their home line in states like Vermont that don't even have offices. And now we're actually making real success. We were the sort of first firm that built mobile apps that had a very specific purpose for the labor movement and organizing apps and things like that. So it was out of necessity that you go, oh, we have to have this back end digital. But now that websites have evolved and things like Squarespace have become really, really robust, and Shopify has basically made it so that all these agencies don't have to go and rebuild another storefront. And so instead of having to have a 30, 40 person development team, you can really sort of hone in and scale down. So my new agency, Catalyst Campaigns, is all about really doing more best-in-class messaging and using the different tools that are out there than necessarily having to go build 100 different little widgets. We're just in a different time 10 years later.
So this is what would first attracted me when Doug gave me your name, and where I think this is a real interesting pivot is you're a digital first guy, and then for the latest presidential election, you come out with this campaign, Remember What They Did, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but this is primarily a billboard campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we went old school because...
Yeah, give us the background on that.
There's no reason. I mean, look, I think you got to use every marker that you have, and especially in times of COVID where you can't knock on doors, when more and more people are cutting the cord on their home phones. So polling has never really been accurate. But voter registration's always been this weird one where you have everybody chasing this mythological unicorn of easy numbers for voter registration. And it's actually hard. The motor voter took care of just about every state in the country has a motor voter law that, like, when you go into the DMV to register, you get your voter registration form filled out there. And the world has also become, as you're in Wisconsin, you saw the bloody battles of, I'm from Ohio. We've watched these battles for for years of the world becoming more and more divided. So those that are not registered are really what the census calls hard to count, right? Like they're neighborhoods that are hard to count, or transient populations that move, or younger populations that are constantly moving. And so I could either be everybody's best friend or be more noise and everybody competing on the same bids in the digital world for the same eyeballs. And let's be honest, if you're hard to count, the match rate that all agencies, everybody that's listening to this podcast, slightly blows past or doesn't really tell their client what the match rate is. The match rate, you tell your client, well, you send us a list, and in the US, until we can no longer do this, we'll match it against Facebook, or we'll match it against a cookie file, or we'll match it against an IP file, right? And those match rates come back at X.
Right.
Let's say they come back at 65%. 65% of your personal data list matching with Facebook is pretty good. But what about the other 35% that didn't match of your targeted audience? And so I get mad at these young digital agencies that were all doing the exact same thing. I know it. I ran an agency. That if you're worrying so much about time, people, and money, you're so focused on, I can't waste any of my clients' money, so there's no bleed anymore. Where marketing and advertising and branding folks all understand that, yeah, radio and TV still work. Billboards still work. You're not going to get a exact ROI off of a billboard, but the messaging that you get off of that will help everybody else's messaging. We put up billboards, posters, point of purchase display advertising, collateral marketing materials all over Wisconsin. And if that helped rock the votes ROI on theirs, great. But the problem is in the U.S. political landscape is that people build their messaging and their branding campaigns around their tax status instead of around what is the most emotional, compelling message to make the sale. And if the sale for this is a voter registration, but we're not allowed to tell you under our tax status, we're a 501c3, we can't give you an emotional, triggering, compelling issue because that's going to hit political, and we would lose our 501c3 nonprofit tax status. So the little tiny bit of money that I raised was like, I'm not going to care. My donors aren't going to care about tax status or tax break. They just want to see some electoral changes. So we're going to legally raise money that's not tax deductible, and we're going to not worry about the ROI of a billboard. We're going to put billboards up in neighborhoods that are what I used to do, going back to that old punk rock day. If a neighborhood was 99% Democratic performance or 99% Republican performance, you didn't take clipboards and worry about each house, or, well, is John home because I might be pulling out a Republican voter when I'm trying to get a Democratic voter. In certain neighborhoods, if it's 99%, don't bother with clipboards. Just knock on every door. And the reality is that from doing this for so long, I've gone into God knows how many trailer parks, and or I could pick on apartment complexes, and the name on your clipboard ain't right anyways.
Right.
Because they're transient. People move all the time in lower income neighborhoods and college town neighborhoods. Everybody told me not to do college advertising, but I mean, let's be honest, man. You've got Madison, Wisconsin. Like, okay, they're not in school and there's COVID, but how many young college age 18 to 25-year-olds are still hanging out because they paid rent on an apartment, or they're part of the ecosystem? Or hell, I had friends that played in bands and never even went to the college and lived in that town because they dug the vibe. They worked at the bars. They had jobs at restaurants. They had their music gig. Those are all potential voters.
Scott, this is really fascinating because, again, I really love the pivot into what the term I use is just traditional mediums, radio, TV, billboards, right? What advice would you have for trying to sell? Let's take it out of the political world a little bit. For somebody trying to sell an idea into like a corporate for a brand, because we are so focused on what's my investment on this, how many, what kind of click rate am I going to get, all the KPIs that come along with digital. You just don't get that, clear line with some of these other ones, but intuitively we know they're important. So how do you sell it in?
I think that hopefully the world is coming around to going, you should base your campaign off of what is the best quality for the best targeting. And so we spend an awful lot of time defining who our market target audience is in politics, that even the nonprofit world doesn't always think about who is their target audience. Some of my corporate and music clients don't always think about who is the best audience. They read an article or they hear something on NPR and go, well, we got to have some of that TikTok. Is your audience on TikTok? Does it even make sense? Are what we selling even make sense on TikTok, right? Like, so I think when you start thinking about inequalities and inefficiencies, so billboards made an awful lot of sense during COVID because I could hit and make the explanation to my small governing board that nobody's leaving a neighborhood. People still got to go buy gas. People still got to go buy groceries. So I'm going to buy billboards in neighborhoods. Highway billboards wouldn't have made any sense for me, right? So I had to argue with, Lamar and some of the billboard companies that
Sure.
wanted to sell me, all the highway stuff and go, well, you can tell your client you're getting more daily eyeballs. This billboard on Interstate 80 is going to give you a gazillion, but that wasn't my goal. So I was able to define my goal. So I think for corporate clients, if you can define the goal and say, we have a new pizza place and we want to get everybody within X amount of miles of our pizza place, then looking at outdoor advertising, the other thing is that outdoor advertising, because it's all now connected through digital, has become much more effective. So, you get what you pay for. So don't think like one digital billboard's gonna, I don't want anybody listening to this think they're like, the digital billboard. Like, you still get what you paid for. So I was trying to buy as many print billboards because I wanted to, in the neighborhood, own the entire neighborhood.
Yep.
I also believe in an old school idea of 2 touches is better than 1 touch. So in politics, if you're running radio, your door knocking did better. You got to the door and people go, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Oh yeah. And they don't know where they heard of it, but that's just the power of radio, that it was on somewhere in the background and you kind of heard. And so I use billboards in that same way. So, okay, we have a billboard, but then when you go to the store and you see our stickers in the window and you see a countertop display and you see voter registration to get a free poster display at 10 different nightclubs that we got to do it. It was easy. Nightclubs weren't open. So create some voter registration synergy as well as try and save the stages was an easy thing to parlay. But back to the point, I think that 2 and 3 touches in a neighborhood or immersive advertising is still an important piece. And so, while I come out of digital, I know that TV is important, but if it's inefficient because cable TV, people have cut their cord on cable and their prices haven't gone down, that's a problem. Or satellite TV, I never would sell to my clients because it was like, look, you're running for commissioner in Vegas and it's a national buy. It doesn't make any sense. But now that you can buy connected TV in such a interesting way, to me, video and video saturation and 30 seconds of messaging is how many places can I put it? that will be multiple touches. So I try and buy digital advertising, video advertising, connected TV, with billboards and bus stations and all the collateral advertising I can buy to really try and give that person a full experience, a full, no matter where I went, on a small budget, I saw and made an impact. And again, for politics, we're not doing months and months of campaigning. We're really only doing, you have 2 months to make that sale.
Got so many questions for you. But I want to jump back, Scott, and talk about what would be your process. So let's say I'm a brand or running for an office, and I'm really, I've seen your work. I've got recommendations. We're having a lunch. We look like we're going to work together. Take me through the process of like bringing me on board, get an understanding. Like, what would you do to kind of assess where you stood with this brand or with this politician?
Yeah, I mean, so several people do this different ways. The way that I do it is through starting with each of my clients doing the same type of digital audit, where I try and figure out how big is their, again, my marketing strategy, even if it's not a digital project for me, I still want to learn the data and the numbers from digital. So that doesn't matter whether it's a person, personality, movie star, rock and roll star, corporate client, small pizza chain, right? There's still going to be, what are people talking about this person online? How big of a footprint do they have? How up to date are they? Are they communicating and engaging with their customers or their activists or their organization in any way? Is it one-sided communication? Is it two-sided communication, right? Like, you can glean an awful lot about a person, a company, a brand, just by seeing, like, do they update their LinkedIn profile from time to time? Do they give a shit about, their Instagram followers, or do they just sort of put it up as a stamp to say, yep, check box, we got that. And then old school campaigning still is my discipline. So that means we do analysis around what are people saying about us, and what are we saying about them. And even my corporate clients, I think that those exercises of just going back to the basics. What are we trying to convey? What is our message? Why is it urgent? Why is it needed now? And literally writing these things out over and over and over again. And so, like, clients that I've tried skipping that step with, you end up going back to it. Yeah. And even clients that I've had for long term, I've got one client that I've worked with for, I don't know, almost 10 years now. And we're constantly going back to what are we saying? What are we doing? Right? Like, how is this stuff run? And so, if it's being run by a small social media agency and they're just churning stuff out because they never had a goal, it's not really your social media. I mean, you're probably not paying a good social media agency, but that's not necessarily their fault. That may be your fault. And so it's, to me, these are probably the lessons that more B2B need to start figuring out, because they never really thought of themselves as public facing in any way. But those agencies are still based off of their credibility.
You mentioned something, and I've heard this in other interviews, and that seems to be, if not the number one problem, Scott, it's in the easily top three, maybe top five, and that is people don't really understand who their audience is. I think they have an idea, but it's loose. It's like, yeah, it's kind of guys 45 to 65. I mean, right. It's not really honed in. Would you say that's like, do you see that as well from your
I
workings?
work with folks that think their audience is something that it's not, and I can show them. I've had arguments with clients over their Google Analytics. I can show them that while they think that they're a big international brand, and they have friends in the UK that see all their stuff, that only 5 people are opening up or going to the website from UK. And so that's great that your mom and your grandmother love you, but how do you look at the rest of your analytics? And so every web developer puts Google Analytics in, and your clients all have it, but they don't look at it and really focus, because it's boring. How many people were on your website? Where did they come from? Okay, we did Facebook ads, and usually it's an agency pushing to say, okay, see, we laid some ads down and it worked. But taking a bigger step back and looking at that 40,000-foot view of, why do we not have more 18 to 25-year-olds on our website? Should we be doing something about it? Or everybody that's going to our website is 45 to 55-year-old women. Should we be doubling down and expanding that? And some of those are just executive decisions. Is there a reason that you should be expanding outside of one market and into another? So I do a lot of union organizing where there's territory wars. So I show my analytics every month to say, look, we're just in Iowa. You may have seen some national press about this campaign or that campaign, but I can show and prove that the bulk of our web traffic is still on our goal and mission. And that makes the board of directors and stakeholders pleased to know that the bulk of their resources, even if it was somewhere else, or if it's an expansion, hey, we want to expand into, I had a artist that wanted to expand into Japan. I go, okay, we can, it's going to cost us more. So we have to set up a different KPI. And I just think that those conversations shouldn't be that hard to have. And that's the digital side that geeks out and goes, look, there is no bullshitting on this, right? Like, there is bullshitting on whether the ad drove the traffic there, TV site drove traffic there, word of mouth drove traffic there, but there is no bullshitting on where did traffic come and how much traffic was actually on your website. Or, if you're retail and brick and mortar, did you sell more beer last week than you did from 2 weeks ago?
Right. You talk a lot throughout this. There's a theme about the power of really good creative and what a difference that can make. Scott, how do you go about getting like that breakthrough kind of creative?
Stop working with candidates is my crass answer.
Okay.
No, there is just so much more freedom when you are your own creative. So like, even with my own agency, every about 6 months, the ideas that we couldn't get to clients to agree on, some of those we would just raise legal funds and just launch on our own. So we did a call Congress tool off of the calling technology, where we called it Drunk Dial Congress. And I couldn't get a client. Everybody wanted to use our calling tools at the time. This is about 5 years ago, and they didn't want to use humor. They took this serious lobbying Congress thing, and by doing the case example, it cost me a fortune because we had to pay Twilio 5 cents a call or whatever it was on going through, or 5 cents a minute, whatever. But we were able to show, with a little bit of creative, you could actually make more calls than just yelling at your members every month, or sending them a text message, or sending them an email that you have to call and yell at Congress about XYZ. So some of it is like, if you have enough belief in your creative.
Right. So you've been able to break through creatively because you've gone outside of the box and have put skin in the game, like you said. Is that even possible, Scott, with when you're working with corporate clients?
It is. You have to have a couple of heroes and champions within the organization, and you have to understand process. So for me, the heroes and champions are always going to be, either the C-level or the legal. Because the goal of this stuff is to move and sell more product or sell or get more people to voter registration. It's not to this isn't anarchy. This is like, how am I moving stuff? And so like once you get creatives that understand that, it's great. I had this organization that I can name them, the Teamsters organization. They're considered, one of the more old-timey labor unions.
Sure.
And this guy was like, "Oh, we'll never use Facebook. We don't want to use Facebook. Facebook's going to be horrible." And okay, we'll use Facebook, but it's got to only be one-way communication. We can't. Like that's not how it works, man. And then within 2 months, more of his members had gotten more communication, and he was on Facebook telling me about all this other. He turned into a Facebook crazy man. Was on Facebook, answering members' questions left and right, and their union became a better union because they were where their members were. And so, getting some of those wins on that gave me the ability to go, hey, why don't we spend a little bit more time on your brand now? Why don't we spend a little bit more time pushing your creative? What if we do a little bit of humor? What if we push on some of the and you build up the wins because you've built up you've built up some trust. And so I don't think that people should give up hope, and I think that a good creative agency is one that pushes. And the people that want to work with me know that I'm a pushy, annoying. I'm going to experiment 100 times. I'm going to come up with 10 ideas, but they're going to say no to 5. And I'm fine with that. That's what you get when you hire a good creative agency or a good consultant of any type. That's really, otherwise, why'd you hire the consultant if they're not pushing you?
Right. Hey, I want to get your take on branding, Scott, because when it's coming to like moving a product, there's just the retail component of it. You turn that into a political campaign. It's like we're trying to get someone elected. There's a very definitive thing there. But when you talk about brand and the importance of it, and I want to understand, how do you sell? Like, we got to spend some time, dollars, energy, and effort to build a brand, right? In convincing people and organizations why it's so necessary. I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, politicians hate being considered a brand. That's their ego. Their ego gets in the way, right? So the second that you start talking about them as branding and marketing, they're like, "No, I'm about changing people, and I'm about solving this problem." And okay, well that's part of who your brand is, but I have to sell you and market you as a brand. And so I remember on the Obama campaign, I had written a memo about POP marketing. I had come out of Sony Music for a while, and I did display advertising marketing and POP. And they're like, "Why are you sending us this memo about soda pop?" And you're like, no, it's point of purchase marketing. Like, this is like, we are not doing any of this impulse buy. Like, how do we get more and more people focused on and it was just fascinating to them of, why would you consider your presidential pick an impulse buy? Right. Like, and so you're not trying to insult your client. And so it's a fine line to walk. But if you're not spending time on that long-term brand, I've helped a couple of more recent ones. I mean, like, Not My President was an easy brand. That wasn't about me. Feel the Burn, which somebody else came up with, that we saw on the internet, and we saw it going viral on the internet. We started doubling down and going, that's the brand. People weren't feeling Hillary, but they were feeling this other. And so that was the brand. So we sold merchandise. We're like, that's genius. I mean, Shepard Fairey did the Hope poster for Obama, and nobody had an ego to say, well, wait a minute, that's better than any of the images and messaging and symbolism that we have. He took our brand that, the Obama campaign paid a creative agency to come up with the logo, with the O logo, $1 gazillion, and they did a great job. But what Shepard Fairey did to it was 10 times better. So like, all ego aside, let's just use that.
Right.
And I think that that's one thing that corporations can learn from fast-moving politics is if somebody's goofing on you online and moving the needle, go with it, right? Or if somebody's giving your sub sandwich a better nickname than you have, go with it. Go into it. And that's where I think that there's still a major disconnect between a lot of brands. I think that the U.S. government right now should be calling and doubling down on the Fauci ouchie. Like, it's brilliant. Like, I go, man, that's what that's what or, doubling down on the fact that everybody right now, today's April 5th, everybody is still posting their Instagram photos of their vaccine. Like, go into that, make some filters for that stuff and dig in deeper, because that is part of the brand to grow things. So I just think that if your brand's not connected with the street, you're missing out. And I don't know that the old-timey Madison Avenue slick polished is going to understand that as much as some of the more boutique agencies that are relying more on, for like, again, political campaigns, and all of my agencies that I've worked with, it's constantly relying on what's happening digital.
Man, we're at the top of the hour, Scott. I got to ask you, what are you doing now? You mentioned a little bit about some international clients. Talk to me about that.
Sure, I just helped out. Well, I'll answer it, and then I'll say who I've been helping. I like the ability to, and the excitement and the scariness of taking on dictators. So I've been involved in Belarus with National Democratic Institute, trying to teach young artists and activists how to organize against Lukashenko, one of the oldest, worst dictators. I've been on the side of justice and human rights in Ukraine against just about everybody. There's been change of power there, and none of them have been good. So I've been helping out like Kiev Pride and some women's rights organizations in Ukraine. I've done a brief stints in Iraq, Georgia, Mexico, Brazil. And so, to me, these places are, as the global economy and the global trade and all these other great things that help you get, hipster coffee and novelty booze, like I realize the world has gotten smaller, and that I want to know the people that are really on the front lines of rising democracies that right now could go either way. And so I've been doing a lot of that stuff. It's been a lot of Zoom calls instead of travel. And then I've got a boutique agency called Catalyst Campaigns that I help out a couple of musicians that are trying to make a digital pivot in time of COVID. I incubated Invisible Hands, which is a meal and food delivery. How do you get more people who are immunocompromised to get grocery shopping done in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Philadelphia area? So incubated those, and then I take on large-scale social justice clients. And when I'm not doing that, I help out the Teamsters Union, a couple other smaller unions, and a couple of mom and pop stores that are friends of the family that I can't say no to.
A lot of irons in the fire, man. That's so cool, Scott. Hey, tell me, give me your top three, top 5 books. But but at least 3 on marketing, right? Where do you draw your inspiration from? And maybe it's not books, maybe it's articles, or maybe it's a blog post or something like that. But what do you look to say to like, wow, this is really good?
I think Spectacle is the number 1 book by far. Too many people in our worlds. How many times have you had clients that are like, I want something awesome, I want but they throw these words around and they don't remember what the true definition of spectacle is. And that book just breaks it down in such a beautiful visual way that, like I had an NPR reporter years ago when I was doing protests that go, I don't want to go to another protest to listen to people just yelling and, into a microphone and, hey, hey, ho, ho, blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's all the same stuff, left, right, doesn't matter. It's the same shitty chants. I want something awesome. And then at the same time she was saying that, I was reading this book, Spectacle, and, it was like, how do I challenge myself to just give that reporter something more awesome? And so Tom DeLay was about to go to jail, and I created Tom DeLay's Carnival of Corruption, and I hired a bunch of circus carnies to come down. So she had something that would be this memorable spectacle, that would be this one-time only thing, and something easier to report on. And so to me, that's probably the number 1. And then I read all sorts of crazy. I'm a big punk rock fan, so I read all sorts of crazy, interesting punk rock art and visual journals. That are thinking about new, interesting creatives. So there's an art magazine called Juxtapose that has had, it's first where I learned about Shepard Fairey, Justin Hampton, who's Queens of the Stone Age artist, who just did an amazing billboards and murals for me. But I've been a fan of his work. So I get to be a kid in a candy store by going, wait, wow, I could use all this other boring shit creative, or I'm just going to reach out to Justin, because Justin Hampton's fucking awesome. And so that's sort of where I get my inspiration from.
Awesome. Scott Goodstein, thanks for your time, brother.
No
I really
worries.
Appreciate it, man. Come back on.
I enjoyed the day drinking with you. So if I started slurring, it's because of Yebiga and what else I got here? Modella Chelada. So wanted to keep up my piece of your podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Cheers.